Puerto Ricans, or Boricuas, as we often call them, and that's the indigenous term for people from that island, have been there was Dr. Jose Celso Barbosa, who was a medical doctor, and so in the time that Puerto Rico was under this, and he was the valedictorian before he went back to Puerto Rico in 1880. So we're talking about a long time ago, obviously, and led the Partido Republicano de Puerto Rico. And so there's been this presence in Michigan. Most notably, though, in 1918, the first significant Puerto Rican colony of primarily single men, Afro-Puerto Rican men from the city of Ponce and the area around it, settled in what was then the Black community, the Black Bottom. They came originally to build ships in New Orleans in 1917. Raul talked about the Jones Act. While many people went to fight in Europe in World War I, a significant number went to New Orleans to build ships. And after the war, a number of them went back to the island. And we're talking about literally hundreds, possibly thousands of Puerto Ricans went to New Orleans to do this. Some fanned out through the United States, but about 100 settled in Detroit after about a year traveling up through the deep South, Jim Crow South, going to places like New York, and then settling in Detroit. I had the good fortune my first year in college in 1971, I was doing a Puerto Rican history research paper along with two other colleagues in Chicano Boricua studies at that time. And my father and uncle told me, okay, you want to know about Puerto Rican history? Well, let's go meet some elders. And then I got to meet these about 7 or 8 of them who were in their 80s. And we sat around a table where they kind of told us about their history. Most of them never went back to the island, or if they did so quickly. They returned and intermarried within the African-American community. So that during my period as a youth activist, starting in the 70s and 80s, I would do work throughout the city. I would encounter a Gonzalez, a Rivera, or Rodriguez, who had grown up culturally African-American, but when you sat down and talked to them, their father or their grandfather was one of these Puerto Ricans. Interesting enough, I really got lucky because I asked my father and uncle, how did you know? Well, didn't you notice the last name is Rivera? So in some way, some of them were extended family members from that area. I was born in Juanadías, Puerto Rico, just outside of Ponce. So that legacy continued and had an impact. One of the things I do want to mention, for a short period of time, I worked at the Department of Human Services and was doing some major collection of data on Latinos and foster care work. And I ran across some data in, I want to say around 2008, 2009, that showed there were significant numbers of Puerto Ricans in every single zip code within the city. And a lot of it had to do with this earlier migration of Puerto Ricans who then kind of integrated within the African-American community. The next major wave was after World War II. And the Puerto Rican government had a problem, or so they thought they had a problem. The economy was so bad in Puerto Rico that a lot of folks were displaced from their agricultural homes, couldn't find a job. So the Puerto Rican government basically acted as a labor contracting organization. And so what that meant was they shipped out Puerto Ricans in large numbers to work in the United States. A significant number of them went to Saginaw, Michigan area to work in the sugar beet production. they've encountered outright discrimination, often weren't paid. It got to the point where many of them then sought relief from the media. There was national and international attention, to the point that some of you who are familiar with Detroit history would know that Monsignor Kern was the activist priest at Holy Trinity Church. He got involved with the sugar beet workers, and there was a campaign for fair justice for these workers. Many of them sent later on settled in Detroit. My uncle was one of those who came 1949. By the early 50s, he then settled in Detroit, called for his brothers-in-law, my father being one of three of them, to come and move to Detroit. And that's how I came to Detroit in the early 50s as part of that second major wave. And it was called Operation Bootstrap by the Puerto Rican government as a way to relieve this internal pressure within the island of folks not having jobs. So they encouraged companies to go to Puerto Rico, gave them significant tax break, but also shipped out Puerto Ricans to the United States. And we settled in what was then Corktown around Holy Trinity Church. A lot of it due to the fact Monsignor Kern was real activist priest, had already helped the Puerto Ricans, but also it was home to the largest Mexican-American community in Detroit. Let me tell you a story about this wave of migrants that were sent to Saginaw. It was so bad, and they were sent in rickety airplanes, that one of the ones destined to come to the Saginaw crashed in the ocean, and significant number of Puerto Ricans died in the crash, but a number of them were straight up eaten by sharks. But some of the survivors ended up settling in Detroit. Two of them I got to know pretty well, and they didn't really talk about the trauma. It was their family that talked about it. It was the Puerto Rican Club was also organized under the support of Monsignor Kern, originally organized as a way to fight against the discrimination that the Puerto Ricans were experiencing, particularly after 1950. There was an attempt of revolution in Jayuya in Puerto Rico, also an attack on the Blair House, which was a presidential house with Truman, and also 1954 attack on the US Congress. As a result, a lot of police and other folks actually took out their anger on Puerto Ricans. And my father, I remember telling me stories about being taken out of nightclubs and what have you, literally being beaten. So that Puerto Rican Club was born out of that. I only have a few more minutes, so we're trying to cover well over 100 years of history. But the next big wave came from the 60s and came directly from the island. The following wave came in the 70s, but this time they came from places like New York, Chicago, and New Jersey, because Detroit was considered really good place to come to live. Remember, for example, the South Bronx during the mid to late 70s was a community in major transition. A lot of the landlords were burning buildings to collect insurance. And so people were fleeing that kind of activity. Fast forward, there's a significant presence of Puerto Ricans throughout the whole metro area and even in Oakland County. There's plenty more to talk about, but I think we're gonna have a question and answer period, and we can talk, hopefully I'll get to some of those points soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Both of you are giving us both awesome history as well as context and appreciation for all of this. And yeah, we do wish we had more time, but I know we have some questions, no doubt. Christine.
We do. So if Raul will come up onto the screen, that would be wonderful. So the first question that we have is, where can we find more information about Puerto Rico?
So we we live in the age of information, and so literally the internet will bring you a lot of good information. Wikipedia has a lot of factual, accurate information, not just about Puerto Rico's history, but also a lot of the names that I mentioned and that I dropped in the chat. I think there's a lot of good books that are out there that also do justice. There's one I think called the name is going to escape me, but I think it's the American Century or something like that. And it is a really good treatment of Puerto Rico's own like internal development, beginning with the colonization by the United States. And so it starts because the 1900s was called, by historians, was called the American Century. And so for Puerto Rico, what that meant was the American colonial century.
Can I also offer another resource? There's a Center for Puerto Rican Studies out of Hunter College, and they produce a quarterly or twice a year journal that covers a wide range of topics. And that's out of Hunter College, and it's the Center for Puerto Rican Studies.
Thanks, Ozzy. It kind of dovetails into the next question, which is, are there resources you can recommend for parents and teachers who want to make sure their children learn about Puerto Rican history? So is there anything maybe additional that you would add for teachers, for example?
I would assume you could find from this, if you contact that center, they might be able to provide some links, because some of their journals have focused on education. Other journals have focused on music. I'm a musician, so that's always where I go to in terms of the intersection between community organizing and culture. But that will be a good starting point. There's the Puerto Rican government has an information site, a very kind of simplistic kind of piece. Right now I can't remember the name of that, but as Raul mentioned, it shouldn't be a hard thing to find.
My go-to, being a Chicago native, is the Puerto Rican Cultural Center in Chicago. Right. They have, their staff, but especially the executive director, can just rattle off a bunch of tools that he knows of that are even used in their own alternative high school that they coordinate. So I could also find that out that way.
I'm going to do kind of a plug for those who are listening who might be interested in taking a college course. For 3 decades, I've been teaching a course on Afro-Latino history and culture in the United States. A significant part of that is on Puerto Rico. It also includes Cuba and other parts of the Caribbean and Latin America, and it's a Wayne State course. I'm currently teaching that right now.
Great, Ozzy, thank you. No, we're glad when you can plug your own work on this program. So the next question is, what are some common foods in Puerto Rican culture? I'm going to add a little twist. What are your favorite foods, Puerto Rican foods?
I'll let Raul go first. No, because I got so many.
Everything. I think living in the diaspora, and for me, I call living outside of Chicago the double diaspora, because in many ways the community that we've been able to create in Chicago is a miniature version of Puerto Rico itself, and so. So all of the food that I can get my hands on. When I go to a Rincón Tropical in Detroit, my family and I, we usually order everything off the menu and then have food for days, because we don't cook it all the time. We're part of that generation that was fairly Americanized, and so. But I think if you give me some arroz con gandules, that's red rice with what are those? Are those pigeon
Pigeon peas.
peas? And some frituras like bacalaitos, which is fried codfish, and some alcapurrias, which is fried plantain stuffed with meat. Give me some of that every day, and I'm set.
If maybe I can put some context, because if people are not familiar with Caribbean food, in this case Puerto Rican food, it's quite obviously different than a Mexican food. It's more kind of it has a lot of commonalities with other Caribbean countries. For example, rice and pigeon peas, arroz con gandules. You also find it in Jamaica. They call it rice with pigeon peas, and depending on what part of the island, there's seafood. Some of our food is very African in character: mofongo, plátano, plantain. And some of the spicing is very similar to New Orleans spicing.
I knew you both would answer that question. I was waiting for Raul to say what he just said, that he orders one of everything on the menu there. So
A quick question.
Good job, Raul. Good job, Ozzy. So what is currently happening around the movement for Puerto Rican statehood? How do the guest speakers feel about this?
I'll take a stab. I'm not pro statehood. I cut my teeth in the movement as a independentista, believer in the independence struggle. I've not been active in that. I think Puerto Ricans have been caught in a quandary because of the reality of the Puerto Rican independence movement, which at one point was very strong. It's not as strong, though. I would say a lot of people have that sentiment. What's interesting, you could have a conversation with Puerto Ricans who are pro-statehood, pro-independence, and pro-Commonwealth, the current status, and all revolves about what's the best way to keep our Puerto Ricanness. So this search for a nation is the predominant thing. And then you layer the political ramifications, the squashing of the independence movement there, and then the economic destruction of the island's economy. A lot of people feel it like in a quandary. So I'm trying to be not a typical, present a typical response, though I cut my teeth as an independentista.
And I would say that much like Ozzy, I too would categorize myself as a pro-independence advocate. As I said, as a colonial subject of the U.S. empire, my goal in life is to be free, and that freedom is not only a mental and spiritual freedom, but it's also a geopolitical freedom. And so I am a staunch advocate of Puerto Rican independence, but I think to really look at that question, especially sort of from an outside view, requires a real thorough understanding of the layered history, of the multi-layered history of Puerto Rico and colonialism, because there's all sorts of things that affect the psychological framework or worldview of people, particularly those who live in the islands. You have a U.S. citizenship that you didn't do anything to gain.
Raul, we lost your
audio.
Yeah.
Still don't have it.
While he's playing, trying to get his audio back, let me just mention a lot of things people may not realize. You know, those of you who grew up in Southwest Detroit are always wondering, why do Puerto Ricans always have a flag on them? You know, I mean, well, do you know it was illegal for us to fly our own flag in my father's generation? I grew up thinking that my mother and father, who went only to 3rd grade, did so because they grew up in an agricultural society and they had to contribute to the family income. What I didn't realize till I was in my 20s was that Puerto Ricans could not teach in Spanish till the late 1940s. So the school teachers who did teach in Spanish were breaking technically the law. So it's that kind of denigration. No wonder Puerto Ricans are very proud. Raul, maybe your microphone's back.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, so just to close off my thought, thank you for that, Ozzy. I think that this multi-layered history also affects the psychological worldview of people living in the islands. You have a citizenship that you didn't fight for, that conversely your elected representatives all voted against and still was ignored. But then we want you to be citizens, but we don't want you to be a part of, right? So territorially, we're not a part of, but we're citizens. If we travel to the United States, we can vote for the president and for Congress as long as we establish a residency. But if we live and our residency is on the islands, then we cannot vote federally. It is really a dysfunctional sort of psyche that develops. And so to think that you can resolve that kind of question by having these annual plebiscites or these non-binding resolutions is foolish when you look at it through a mental health perspective. And that foundation was set by the United States policies, not just in one given point in time, but since 1898.
So Raul and Ozzy, this is so good. And and when you both were asked to be on, we knew that it was just going to be really dynamic and wonderful. And I want to thank both of you for being here. We do have to move on, but there's another question that was asked, and I want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to answer it. So we're going to make sure that we send that question to you. And then if there's anything else that you want to share with the audience, because I know that both of you had a lot more to say around all of these questions, and that they're complex, and the answers are complex and don't necessarily fit into a short time frame. But I want to thank both of you so much. It's been really a pleasure to interact and learn more. So thank you both. And I'm going to kick it back to Jametta, and I will make sure you guys get the other question because it's an important one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're both humbled and overjoyed to be part of this discussion and to have the opportunity to be able to give you a platform and to engage and educate. And so as we also always want to do in our segments, is that we also are focusing in on health. We are in a pandemic, and we are a community that has disproportionately. So please make sure that you that you have your mic on mute, so that in this pandemic we need to hear the voices of both public health, our physicians, and our scientists. And so we're pleased to welcome back Dr. Eric Mcgrath from Wayne Health, and in particular to talk to us about immunizations and vaccines and what we need to be aware of as we think about the importance, particularly for pediatric immunizations and going forward. Dr. Mcgrath, please join us and welcome again.
Hi, thanks for having me today. I'm still here in my office, so it's a little bit, looks kind of like I'm packing, but we are excited because although there's no COVID vaccine yet available, we do have flu vaccine, and this is the season that we really want to, of course, encourage everyone to get their flu shot that can, and we're excited to have, I wanted to tell the audience here about this weekend's event that we have planned with Wayne State and the Department of Health for Detroit, along with our friendly partners in pediatrics at Henry Ford. Wayne Pediatrics Clinic is now at 400 Mac. It's open and seeing patients since September 21st. So we're relatively newly open. And one of the things to sort of help address issues that have come up during the pandemic is that we wanted to have a vaccine fair, but we knew we would have to do it in with protective gear on and stuff. And we saw the parking lot of our building and that they had used it, excuse me, for the COVID sort of drive-through testing model earlier in the year. at 400 Mac because the adult group has Wayne Health there. And so we said, well, maybe we can do the same concept for a vaccine drive-through fair where people can come whose kids are due for shots or immunizations. And, you know, with the partners from the Detroit Health Department supplying the vaccine, we are happy to say that they have a good supply, and I'm told they have a good amount of flu shots. So we'll be using the state provided MICR program that has the Michigan Care Registry and Improvement Registry. So we will have, you know, what the state of Michigan has on file for every child in the area. And if you are able to make an appointment, we would like to try to schedule appointments through the health department. And I have the number, I guess I can just give it. Maybe I can I share my screen? We have.
Or if you state it, we'll grab it. We'll make sure it gets into the chat as well.
Okay.
But you may be able to share. There we are. We got you.
Okay. So yeah, so it's at our site on Saturday, this coming Saturday, and the weather looks amazing, like 78 and sunny. So I'm really optimistic. It's a free event, but we, you know, of course, parents need to bring their ID, and if they have an insurance card, Department of Health will take it. And we want everyone in the area to know that, you know, the staff, the volunteering staff is all going to be wearing full personal protective equipment as appropriate. And then if they want to make an appointment, they can call that number, the 313-876-4667. And I mean, we don't mind also if they drive up, if it turns out suddenly you have time and you realize a child would be due for a shot maybe they had missed, because a lot of patients and children in Southeast Michigan, but in Michigan as a whole, missed a lot of vaccines while a lot of the initial quarantining and the shutdown was going on early in the spring and even into the summer. Some families have been hesitant to come back to care for sort of routine stuff like vaccines. And so we were trying to help catch kids up as much as we could by having this safe sort of stay in your car. But for little kids, we do have the Henry Ford mobile unit, and that's so exciting. They let us borrow that for the event. So we can have the littlest kids where we usually do the immunizations in their thighs. We can have them undress like sort of safely and privately in the mobile unit for the younger kids. But for older kids who just need a flu shot, they can stay right in their cars. We have some handout stuff for them. Some, you know, in the pens, you can keep the pen, you don't have to give it back. And we are supposed to have all the shots that you see there available through the health department, including flu. So this was the time of year we were told that even if you were going back virtually, some schools were requiring, you know, the vaccines be updated. So we thought this would sort of be timely or coincide with that. And hopefully we'll get people to sign up. And that just helps us spread our work out throughout the day so that we don't have a massive backup. We will have Wayne State Police Service out there sort of helping us direct traffic and a lot of volunteers. So we hope it's a good day and a good event, and we can get some patients and children updated on their immunizations, at least so we can protect against what we have, like measles and whooping cough. We worry about those kind of coming up if the population is not having all their shots on time. So we hope to be able to address that and provide flu vaccine for anyone who wants it. That's all I have, actually.
Dr. Mcgrath, thank you so much. Families, please get your little people in for those well-child checkups. Get back on that schedule, and please go in for immunizations and also the flu shot. This is serious. We need to be healthy as we can and armed and ready to go. So when we talk about being literally armed, meaning we have information and we're ready to go, we need to be talking about voting. And we're really pleased to have, thank you so much, have Melanie come back with us. Melanie Mcelroy, she's the Michigan Voice Voter Protection and Organizer. We're really pleased to have you come on board. Please give us some of the essentials that we need to know for our voting in these coming weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Melanie, welcome.
Hi,
Hi.
my name's Melanie, and I work on voting rights and election protection, nonpartisan, not for any candidate or party, but just making sure that everyone in Michigan, and especially places like Detroit, Flint, Pontiac, that we have access to the ballot and that we feel safe in doing so. So a couple of tips I wanted to bring you today. I just got out of a meeting about how bogged down the clerk's office is here in Detroit. They are a little late to get absentee ballots out. So I wanted to let you know that if you want to vote early, if you want to vote before November 3rd, you can go to one of many satellite locations around the city of Detroit. I'll make sure we drop the link in the chat so you can find one. You can show up to anyone if you're registered in the city of Detroit. You can ask to vote via absentee ballot, fill it out right there, give it right back to them, and then you're all set. So we really recommend that people take advantage of this. You don't have to order one ahead of time. You don't have to sign up. You can just go directly to one of these satellite locations if you're a Detroit voter. Another thing that you can do if you receive a ballot in the mail, make sure you fill the whole thing out front and back. Make sure that you sign the envelope on the outside, seal it up. You can drop that into one of 30 drop boxes around the city. They say election official secure drop box on them. They're red, white, and blue. And there's also going to be a list of those on the website that we're going to post. But it's really important that we take advantage of these services as opposed to waiting for the mail. The mail is moving a little slowly this year. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that that is an option. Also, if you are not yet registered to vote, or if you're someone who has moved and hasn't updated their voter registration, you can still register at the clerk's office. And unlike past years, you can actually register all the way up into and on election day. So it can be November 3rd and you can wake up and decide, you know what, I do want to get involved. I'm just not registered yet. So you go over to the city clerk's office, get registered. You'll have to take with you a proof of residency. So maybe a phone bill, a credit card statement, something that shows where you live, and that's all you need. You're going to be able to register and to vote on the same day. They'll give you a receipt, send you right over to your polling location, or allow you to vote absentee. So these are some new things that we have this year. There is a little bit of confusion because so much is happening. People are voting from home in large numbers. We've never seen anything like this before, but we do have a help hotline. We have one in English, we have one in Spanish, we have one in Asian American languages, and we have one in Arabic. And I'll post all of those in the chat as well. The English hotline is 866-OUR-VOTE, and that connects you to a team of attorneys that we have volunteering to answer questions and also to send people out if there are incidents at the polls. If a polling place isn't open on time, if someone is being intimidated or turned away, we have volunteers who will show up to help you. So that is how to connect with us through that hotline. You'll also probably see people out there with lawn signs, with t-shirts that say election protection. Any of us are happy to help you. And you're also probably the biggest mouthpiece in your own community to spread proper information about the election. So make sure that you're letting people know that in Michigan, you are allowed to vote if you have a felony, if you're on probation, if you're on parole. None of that stops you from being eligible to vote. All you have to do is be a citizen of this country, and you have to be 18 years old by election day. But nothing else will prohibit you from voting. So there is a lot of misinformation out there. I know that you all have deep roots in your communities, in your churches, in your schools. So it's important that when you hear something about voting, make sure that it's true. Check with somebody, check with one of the websites that I'll post, and make sure that people understand their right to vote. You can still vote at the polls on election day. Just because we are promoting early absentee voting for your safety, that doesn't mean you cannot vote at the polls. That's still going to be an option from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on November 3rd, on that Tuesday. So you can go to your regular polling place. I'll post the link to find your polling place if you don't know where that is. We recommend that people take their own black pen with them. That's a tip that might help you stay safe. It keeps you from having to share pens with other people. If you take your own black pen, they will let you use it. That's one way to keep your hands extra clean. Of course, we recommend that you wear your mask and that you stay 6 feet apart from everyone at the polls. And many polling places are going to be set up so that you don't have to be close to one another. So those are some great extra tips to remember. If you are at the polls by 8 p.m., you will be allowed to vote no matter how long you have to stay there. So make sure you get there before 8 p.m. If you have an absentee ballot, make sure you turn it in to the clerk's office, to one of the drop boxes, or vote at a satellite location by 8 p.m. The postage on your absentee ballot, when you turn it back, it's not required. You can drop it into any of these boxes without having to buy a stamp. Just remember to get it in there by 8 p.m. on election day. Also note that our results for the election may not be posted on election night, and that's okay. We're going to have to be patient. There will be a lot of absentee ballots to count. But if you have any questions or if you feel uncomfortable, any of the volunteers at our hotline will be happy to help. So I appreciate you all for listening, for getting involved. If you have any additional questions, like I said, we're working around the clock to get those answered, and to make sure that communities have the tools they need to talk about the election. So you'll see pamphlets around there. We'll make sure that 482 Forward gets access to any of our physical materials for any in-person events, but then most importantly, shareable graphics that you'll be able to promote to your own friends and network online. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And I know I spoke really quickly. I sympathize with the interpreter that had to interpret me so fast. Thank you.
Melanie, that was a Zoom download. Congratulations. You were able to give us an awesome amount of information. The good news, though, is that we know people can contact you at Michigan Voice. There are other sites that are available as well. But there probably should be some questions, because as you said, there's been a lot of confusion that's purposely being tossed about. Christine, do we have any questions around voting or questions specifically for Melanie?
Surprisingly enough, we do not have any questions. Melanie, thank you for putting the hotline in. I'm going to read it out loud for our audience. So the hotline is 866-R-VOTE, 866-R-VOTE. And the Spanish hotline is 866-VEY-VOTA. And you can find your polling place on michigan.gov vote. And then Melanie, you talked a little bit about the mail, and so you guys are really recommending, I just want to reiterate this. I actually just had some checks sent to our house, and it took 2 weeks to get them from the thumb of Michigan down to southeastern Michigan.
Wow.
So I just want to reiterate that you're really pushing folks or asking folks to vote early, and if you're going to vote absentee, to put them in the ballot boxes. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I had a check I had to mail to Pontiac from Detroit, and it took 2 weeks. So we really need to make sure we're hand delivering these ballots. You cannot collect other people's ballots, just yours, and an immediate family member, like a parent who may not be able to leave the house. You can take their ballot for them as well. But make sure you drop them right into one of the official drop boxes.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And Jametta, back to you.
Yes, thank you again. And so we're getting ready to talk about voting. We've been focused on that because this is a way of us claiming and asserting our power. And we have to always end our discussions with you with a parent perspective. And I am so honored and delighted to bring Melanie Mcelroy, who is a dynamic parent. She has been active in our community in many organizations. She blesses us by being part of the Detroit Parent Network. She also works with Hope Starts Here, and probably the list would go on and on. But Melanie, you were part of the Freaking Vote Friday last week. And hey, working on our Rock the Vote. Tell us your story, please.
First of all, I want to thank you, Ms. Jametta, and everybody on the coalition for inviting me. I really didn't think it was that profound until I actually did it. Last Friday, with Freaking Friday, to get out the vote, I was there as a community engagement specialist for Detroit Parent Network. So just supporting 482 Forward, but then getting a chance for me to be able to vote for the very first time, you guys, the very first time. I like to pride myself on being active in my community, helping other marginalized families like mine, but still haven't really got to the point where I've actually voted. So I said, I'm not going to send my absentee ballot in on this day. I am going to do something outside of anything I've ever done. I am going to go and be a part of this process, because really to see the ignition in the young people with Molly and all of those guys, the young people chanting, this is what democracy looks like. How could I have missed out on those things, right? Really, my kids were so proud of me that I did it for the first time, and just being self-reflective of why I didn't do it before. Feeling defeated, like I'm part of all of these wonderful organizations, and you guys do so much wonderful work, really just trying to help families like mine just to have a better life, something so simple, but really nothing ever changes with policy, right? Just so feeling defeated and feeling like nothing is ever going to change. They don't care. But I decided on that day, my vote can really turn the whole thing around. Just really one vote matters so much. And I just felt really, really empowered. It was almost surreal with Molly helping me, the younger people helping me to understand who's on the ballot. A lot of them I know, but a lot of them I didn't know. A lot of things that I didn't know. So just getting a quick crash course on what to look at and what to think about for my own children, right? And so on that day, we went in and I was able to use my voice, just like in many other ways that I do all the time. But this felt different. This felt amazing. I will never not vote again. I felt so powerful in that moment for something that Black women, Blacks in general have never been able to do, not even that long ago, right? It wasn't that long ago that we couldn't even vote. And so I really did my family a disservice by not taking that opportunity. And so that ended on this Friday. So I'm super proud of myself. My children were jumping up and down like, Mama, you did it. Like I really did something. And so to hear them, say that to me, like you did it. That just shows my African-American little girls, like use your voice, go to the polls, be a part of change, because now more so than ever, if you haven't done it before, this is the time, because it is imperative. Literally, I feel like our lives are at stake with just everything going on, right? And so we have to take control of the things that we can't control. And going to the polls is something that I can control. And you won't hear about me not being able to go and vote or whatever excuses I used to use, even being active in my community. I need to be a part of this. We need to be a part of history, and we need to change the direction in which everything is going, especially for families like mine. So thank you so much for inviting me.
And thank you, Namichia. I think Molly and the other people, all of us are in here doing a praise and a happy dance, because you are claiming your power. You've always had it.
Yes.
And the light bulb went off and said, every vote counts. Lord knows, we've seen what happens when people don't vote. So
that's right.
Vote, and that your children were there to see you carry that legacy.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm fired up. I got to pass the ball to Christine so she can end it. Now, Mitch, thank you, parents. You've heard her. Thank you for
Thank you so much. Go out and vote. Christine. Go out and vote. Bring your friends.
You are so right. I don't think anyone could have said it better. I was over here really like tearing up, because it's powerful. And thank you for being powerful for yourself, for your family, for our community, for all of us. So thank you. So it's time to wrap up. Thank you everyone, for our panelists for being here, and for the audience members that have joined us. Again, if your question wasn't answered, we'll get the answer to the questions and post them next week on onedetroitpbs.org and on DPTV Facebook. You can sign up for regular updates by filling out the form that's in the chat right now, or you can put your email or phone number in the chat, or you can text us that information to 313-288-2082. Again, the phone number is 313-288-2082. 288-2082. So as always, we have a few asks for you before we wrap up today. The first is please visit DetroitVotes2020.org and get registered, get yourself to one of the early voting sites, and or send in your absentee ballot. And you heard just how amazing voting can be. So please do that. You can also attend Freakin' Vote Friday. And this event is going to be every Friday from 2 to 4:30. We're hosting early voting events. Tomorrow's event is actually going to be at 590 Connor. That's Wayne County Community College. And next week, Freaking Vote Friday will be in Clark Park in Southwest Detroit. So come and join us. You can also join us on Monday at 1 p.m. for a live stream about Indigenous Peoples Day, which is on Monday. And I'm not going to read off this website, but it's we can post it on DPTV's Facebook. This town hall is really truly a group effort. So before we go, I'd like all of our partners to turn on their video and remind everyone to stay healthy, stay powerful, and stay strong. And Christina, could you say that in Spanish, please?
Yes, definitely. Manténgase saludable, manténgase empoderado y manténgase fuerte. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone have an awesome rest of the day and a great rest of the week. Thanks for being with us today.
Be blessed.